I'm Samson Yangwe, data scientist at the Clean Slate Initiative. And today I want to show you the Clean Slate Initiative Data Dashboard, a new resource produced by the national organization Clean Slate Initiative in order to help communities, advocates, policymakers, and researchers better understand how many people across the country have a conviction or non-conviction record and how various clean slate laws could help remove those barriers to opportunity and create pathways for millions of people to reintegrate within society without the burden of a record. You can get to this dashboard at cleanslateinitiative.org/data, and there you will find something that looks like this. Now, this dashboard depicts the total number of people that we estimate have a record as of 2019, based on official data sources like the annual survey of jails produced by the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the National Corrections Reporting Program, and a range of other official state and federal surveys and data collection programs. We've taken that, built off of cutting-edge research methodologies pioneered at the University of Georgia and by the Brennan Center and by other organizations that have begun to better understand how to take data on arrests and convictions and other aspects of the criminal legal system and estimate the total number of people, individuals, that represents, regardless of how many arrests or convictions they have on their individual records. We've taken that methodology, expanded it, and refined it to be able to provide a breakdown not only of the total number of people who have a record, but also what types of records they have, whether it's a conviction or a non-conviction, whether it's a felony or a misdemeanor. And we've also provided breakdowns by race and by gender to understand how different populations within each state are impacted by a record and could be benefited by a clean slate law. Now, to start off this data dashboard, one of the most important tools will be this filter that allows you to pick a given state, even multiple states to compare, or you can show data for the entire country, all 50 states plus DC. It's set up by default to show the nationwide setting, but you can unclick nationwide and check a given state or multiple states to see data for those states. The overall map is providing a breakdown of the total percent of adults living in each state that we estimate have a record of some kind. And that ranges, as you can see. In some states, it is fewer than 1 in 5 people that we estimate have a record. In other states, it's more than 40% of the adult population in places like New Mexico, Arkansas, and Wyoming. Now, what you can also see on the right here is the total number of people that have a non-conviction record, the total number of people who have a non-violent misdemeanor conviction, but no more serious convictions on their record, the number of people who have hard to clear misdemeanor convictions, like convictions for misdemeanor assault or a DUI, people who have non-violent felony convictions on their record, and people who have violent felony convictions on their record. And then finally, you can see of the 71 million adults that, based off of our model and our analysis, we project to have a record nationwide, 71 million adults as of 2019 at the state level, not including federal records, immigration records, et cetera. Of those 71 million people, about 11 million of them have non-convictions only, so an arrest that did not lead to a conviction of any kind. About 23 million have nonviolent misdemeanor convictions. Less than 10 million have hard to clear misdemeanors. About 15 to 16 million people have nonviolent felonies, but no violent felonies on their record. And fewer than 6 million people, we estimate, have violent felonies on their record. Now, this gray area, about 6.2 million people, represents the total population that is currently in prison, in jail, or on state supervision or correctional control. So when we think about mass incarceration, the United States has one of the highest, if not the highest, rates of incarceration in the world, the largest number of people incarcerated at any given time. And that represents this gray area, the 6.2 million people, is an expansive interpretation that represents not only those currently incarcerated, but also those currently under state supervision, like probation and parole. And yet that represents a small proportion of the overall population, 71 million people who have a conviction or non-conviction record of some kind. Scrolling down, you can see the breakdown of who has a record by population group, by race, and by gender. One of the things that you'll notice here is that, particularly for Black communities and Native American communities, people are more likely to have a record than the national average. So about 28% of adults nationwide, we estimate, have a record of some kind, but a third of Native Americans and nearly half of Black adults have a record of some kind, according to our estimates. It should also be noted that for both Latinos and for Native Americans, our estimates are likely undercounting the total population with a record because we're relying on official data sources like the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the National Correction Reporting Program, and the Uniform Crime Report Arrest Program, all of which tend to undercount Latinos and Native Americans within the criminal legal system. They tend to misclassify many folks as white. This is well documented. We know this. And so it's important that, when we're taking data from this and you're using data from this, that you understand that we're likely undercounting Latinos and Native Americans who are even more impacted than what the official data suggests. Scrolling down to the next section, we focus on clean slate policy impacts. How could a range of different potential options for a clean slate law make a difference in people's lives? So we have 5 potential options that really span the range of clean slate policies that we've seen in most states, ranging from policies that only clear your record if you have a non-conviction record, but will not clear convictions, so the least expansive policy possible, to a policy that clears not only your non-convictions, but will also clear any number of nonviolent misdemeanors or felony convictions. And such a policy, we project, would fully clear the records, meaning would remove all conviction and non-conviction records from 50 million people's record. So again, that is a huge proportion of the 71 million overall people we estimate have a record of some kind. And that means about 71% of white people with a record, 70% of Latinos, and 66% of Black people with a record would see their entire record cleared under such a policy. Now, we provide this breakdown by race for each policy because one of the things that you'll notice is that the less expansive policies, the policies at the top here, have a larger disparity in record clearance, in who would benefit from record clearance. And when we scroll down to the bottom, the more expansive policies tend to have a smaller gap in who would benefit, meaning that almost as many Black people with a record would see full record clearance as a proportion of the overall population as white people with a record who would see record clearance. Finally, the last section of this data dashboard focuses on waiting periods. Now, for most clean slate laws, they come with provisions called waiting periods, which specify that there has to be some amount of time after you've either received your conviction or non-conviction or been released. There's a waiting period or a time period whereby that person is not eligible for record clearance until that time period elapses. So in some cases, it could be as little as 1 year, even less than 1 year, where after 1 year, that person would be able to have their convictions eligible for clearance. For other states, they have policies that range from 4 years to 6 years, even 10 years that a person has to wait before their conviction is eligible for record clearance. And so we've modeled that for people with felony convictions, for people with only misdemeanor convictions, as well as a breakdown by race and by gender. So you can see how many people would not be eligible for record clearance because their convictions are, in this case, only 1 year old or less, or 2 years old or less, etc. Now, that's the overall data dashboard showing data for the whole country. What you can do with this data dashboard that can provide data that is relevant for your individual state is use this menu to select one or more states to view data specific to those areas. So to do that, you uncheck the nationwide option and you check one or more individual states. So for this demo, I'm going to use, let's say, Florida. So in the state of Florida, once you select Florida in the menu, all of the data on the dashboard will update to show data specific to Florida. And in Florida, according to our model, about 36% of adults had a record in 2019, one in every 2.8 adults. So again, that is a higher rate than the national average, which is 28% of adults. You can also see how that breaks down by type of record. 700,000 people have non-convictions, but no convictions on their record. You can see how that breaks down by race and by gender. One thing that stands out here is not only are for both white and Black people, there's a higher proportion of adults who have a record than the national average. But for Black people in particular, it approaches 70%. We're talking about more than 2/3 of Black adults in the state of Florida that we estimate have a conviction or non-conviction record of some kind, and more than 40% of white adults. So again, when we think about the potential for clean slate policies to make an impact on millions of lives, in just the state of Florida, we're talking about the majority of the Black population and almost the majority of the white population having a record of some kind, having a barrier that a clean slate law could be a solution to removing in order to create pathways to opportunity for that many people. One thing you can also do is compare different states. So let's say we wanted to compare the state of Maryland with a nearby state, let's say Virginia. So I've selected Virginia and Maryland. You'll note that I do not have nationwide selected. So when you want to show data for one or more states, make sure that the nationwide option is not selected, but only those states are. And here you can see the data for Virginia and Maryland. More people overall with a record in Virginia than Maryland. You can see the distribution's a little bit different too, where more people have non-convictions in Maryland than in Virginia, which has implications for the impact of various clean slate policies. And then you can also see those comparisons between the different states. Now, to return back to the nationwide view, you unselect each of the states, and you only select the nationwide option. So that brings you back to the national overview. And that's it. So this is the data dashboard. It is a work in progress where we'll continually update and refine the data over time in response to feedback from activists and organizers and everyday people who reach out wanting information that they wish they saw on here, but we don't yet have. So I encourage you to reach out to data@cleanslateinitiative.org with your suggestions, your recommendations, things you would like to see data on that maybe we don't have yet, but might be able to produce in the future. And it's important to note that this data all represents an analysis that runs through 2019. We are working on updating that to include data for 2020, 21, 22, 23. But so far, we have data through 2019, as many official data sources that we rely on have not yet published full year detailed data for some or more of those years. So we're working on expanding this. Check back periodically to see what's been updated. And use this data as a tool to push for the most expansive and impactful and equitable clean slate policies possible in all 50 states plus DC. That's how we can remove barriers for as many people as possible and get to a world in which opportunity is broadly shared and a prior conviction or non-conviction record is no longer a barrier to finding opportunity in the United States. Thank you.